welcome to another edition of the Atlantic Center for Independent Living podcast. I'm Donald Campbell. I'm your host, and I'm here with our first ever repeat guest because she keeps writing books. She just keeps writing books, awesome books. This is my board member, excellent advocate, Karyn Adams. So, Karyn, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone, and Donald, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, so tell us about the book. So you are now a two-time author. Is this your second book? And your
Yes,
first book was about your son Stan, correct? And
yes.
and now you're let's talk about your other son because your sons are just out there doing amazing things and creating content and books. So tell us why you decided to make a second book.
Well, I promised Stefan that I would write a book about him after I wrote a book about Stan. However, I was kind of stuck because I didn't know where to start as far as Stefan. But one of my sisters said, "Well, have Stefan be your co-author. He who knows the story better than Stefan." And I said, "Oh, okay." It was the best thing I could have done. Stefan ran with it. The book is the challenges and triumphs of Stefan Adams. He was my co-author. He ran with it, and it was actually the easy process. And just like Stefan also has special needs, and the book tackles the early years, the challenging times, and also the triumphs, and also testimonials from people who know Stefan, and also a list of resources, and also a list of some words of wisdom for parents who have kids who are newly diagnosed.
Yeah, what I love about your books is they're very short and to the point and simple. It's not like you're sitting there reading an 800-page book, which who has the time for that? I also love, I also loved that you included your son in the process because I think that's a real important part of advocacy. Because I know a lot of parents and guardians sometimes when they're doing stuff, they don't include the person with the disability who they're advocating for. So talk about why that's so important. And I mean, like you said, it's about his life. So he's
Exactly.
an important part of the story.
Of course, I definitely encourage that. If your child is able to help you contribute to the book, absolutely. Stefan, like I said, he ran with it, and who knew his story better than he could, and he also had some triumphs as well. So we talked about those, and we also have pictures because I didn't want the book to just be me talking about Stefan. I wanted to be there to be pictures as well. So there's pictures and
Yeah.
testimonials from people who know Stefan. So I think with the combination of all those different areas, I was very pleased with the book.
Yeah, so tell us, we'll start with the challenges and then we'll talk about the triumph. So, what was
Sure.
it like with his disability and how was that journey like at the beginning?
Well, Stefan, as far as he was delayed in speech, he had also some other delays, and he actually went into early intervention, and he was able to be there for a couple of years, and then he moved into a self-contained kindergarten, and he's also been in self-contained classes up until high school, which is when he actually, was pulled out for resource. But so, we had some of these early years. We noticed, some things with Stefan, and also as far as the challenges there, you know, it's something about that middle school, going from middle school into high school, and Stefan had some behavior issues, and we reached out to everybody in our village and to ask for people to ask for support, and also he had a really good doctor. So between the village and having a good doctor, it really helped. He was also, he still has counseling, and just teaching him strategies as well, which is what the counselor did. So it's really important that even when your kid is going through some behavior issues, you still have to remember you're the parent. Still, at the end of the day, you have to advocate and do everything you can, to help during
And
those times.
what's your kind of tips for advocacy? because advocacy is tough. Navigating a system and a school system and a medical system, and also living your life and trying to take care of yourself and your responsibilities is really tough. So, but I love what you said there. At the end of the day, you're the parent. I have a variation of the same thing. I always say to the people we're helping that usually it's the individual. I say at the end of the day, it's your life. I can't want it more than you. So, what is your tip? Because people often get stuck in the unfairness, or the just the frustration, and I always say you got to kind of push through, and that doesn't mean you can't make the world better as you're doing it, but like if you're waiting for everything to be perfect, you're not going to get what you need. So talk about that, talk about being resilient and how to manage that stress.
Well, we have SPAN, so they're really, really great as far as if you have any issues in the school, they will come and help you advocate for your child. That was really important. It was always nice to reach out, try to reach out to resources that are available to you. And here, living where we are, there's so many different resources. We have Faces for Autism, we have Harder Surfing, we have 21 Down. It's just a lot of different services that are here. Either Archipelago County also, they also have a lot of different
Yes, yes.
areas.
Yep.
And also keeping them busy, both for the boys. They're boys. They have all this energy.
Mhm.
So we started them out in sports early. They started out, Stefan was T-ball, and Stan was baseball. And Stefan was in baseball for 6 years. After the third year, Stan's like, I'm done. I said, okay. So after baseball was karate. So both boys went in karate. I spent lots of days and nights in those karate chairs, in the chairs waiting for them to finish. Stefan was in karate 15 years. Stan, I think it was about 12 years. But Stefan, at one particular point, he's like, oh, I don't want to do karate anymore. I'm like, remember, what your goal is. You said your goal is your first degree black belt. So I said, what I will do, I'll make sure you have all the resources you need to achieve that. So we had private lessons. Every time he had a black belt test, I paid for private lessons for him. So he had private lessons with one of the senseis, and she would every week go over that curriculum with him to the point where he was ready, and he tested for his first degree black belt, and he received it.
Awesome. Well, I think what you said there was so important. It's so important to reach out to your sense of community. I mean, I know some people listen to this podcast who aren't in New Jersey, but go to your Center for Independent Living, Google, see
Yes,
what's on Facebook, ask around. You're not the only one, autism we're talking about here, but there's, so many disabilities and so many groups. And if there isn't one in your area, start one. Start one, become that resource, and you'll be surprised how many people need it. Because as Karyn said, you need a village. You need people to
yeah,
support. You need people to vent to when it's rough. You need people to talk about and to be like, oh, don't use this program, use that program. Like, don't
exactly.
reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. So I really encourage people, if they don't know where to start, Googling your center, because Centers for Independent Living exists nationwide, and asking about
Absolutely.
what different groups are there? What different activities? And I also want to highlight what Karyn said because I think it's so, so important too. It's like at the end of the day, they're kids, they're boys. Because I mean, a lot of people who come into my office, especially, and they'll go, my 15-year-old with autism, and oh my God, they're doing all these things. And I'm like, yeah, it's part of their disability, but also they're a 15-year-old acting like a 15-year-old. Like we
Yeah,
treat people with disabilities like they're made of glass sometimes, or that
exactly.
they're not going through the same things we're all going through. They're boys with
And they
issues
do.
at the
They
end of the day.
do go
Yeah.
through those. Yeah.
So
And
talk about that.
Stefan,
Just keeping
he,
the same
yeah,
state, like treating them like they're regular people, and saying if you want to do karate and you have a goal, stick to it. Like I just think people forget that at the end of the day. Like it's not all your disability; it's just normal challenges of life too.
and it doesn't have to, everyone, there's different, different disabilities.
Right.
Stan had autism, Stefan has other special needs, but you have to reach out to these different organizations that are in your area because we're lucky, we're blessed there's a lot of we have here, but there's an art in every
Right,
county.
right.
There's art. And
Yes,
as you mentioned, Atlantic Center. Well, there's centers for independent living as well. So a
right,
lot
right.
of it is just reaching out. You know,
Right, and don't wait. I mean, nobody's gonna knock on your door and be like, "I heard you got a diagnosis." You gotta, and that's what Karen, I think, really drives home too. That I have noticed, like, you have to create the action. That doesn't mean people won't help you, but if you want to accomplish something or get the needs met, you have to do it. And I can just say this as somebody with cerebral palsy. If I waited around too, and my mom waited around too for everything to happen, nothing, nothing would have happened. You constantly have to advocate and push for things, and talk about a sort. Were there was so talk about Stefan's diagnosis. You said it was kind of different than Stan's. Talk about what you're comfortable with and how it's kind of different. And was that a challenge too? Is dealing with different kinds of disabilities?
well, it's social pragmatic disorder, and it's basically, you don't have the repetition like autism, but they also challenge, is struggle with, trying to like follow different cues, social cues. So it's similar to autism, but the social piece is really important. And that can be really challenging when when they're not able to pick up on those cues. And that's where the therapy comes in. That's where the counseling comes in. Stefan still goes to counseling. He's 21. He still goes to counseling.
Yes,
But
everybody
one
should go to therapy. We should all.
exactly. And one thing I want to mention is that I know in high school, both boys, I was always part of the special ed advisory council committee. And the sad part about it is that every supervisor of special ed from all the schools, the high schools in the district are there. But there was only me and one other parent, which is
I
really,
think.
really sad. And I asked the supervisors from the different schools, high schools, and they said, well, sadly enough, Mrs. Adams, when kids with disabilities get into high schools, parents kind of become they just figure like, okay, this is the best it's going to get, and they no longer advocate. Which I told them that really should not happen because you should always advocate for your son or daughter.
Right, and these are where, like, these councils and stuff, you and I know this, and I really encourage people with disabilities and people with loved ones with disabilities to get involved in these things because these are where decisions are made.
That's
And
right.
decisions are made by people who show up to
Exactly.
the meetings. So I know we're all busy, but I know that you and I both have had these frustrations when you go to a number of groups that really need voices from everywhere in the disability community, and it's a lot of the same people doing the
Exactly.
same thing. So we are always asking for more. And a lot now there's a lot of stuff you can get involved virtually. So I really encourage people and really talk about that too, because sometimes the pushback I get is, Donald, I'm not only am I busy, but I don't belong there. I don't, what do I know about being on a special or a nonprofit board or a council, and I'm always like, no, you bring a lot because of your personal experience. So talk about
Exactly.
that you should have the confidence to be in these rooms and have an opinion.
Exactly. Because the other thing is that if you're not at that meeting, you cannot complain about anything that is not happening for your son or daughter that you think should be happening in the school. If you're not at that meeting, you can't complain. Um, and just, as Donald mentioned, just making sure that you are advocating. Advocating is it never ends. So if your son or daughter 20, 21, no, you don't stop advocating for them.
Right.
You continue to advocate for them. And there's organizations that are there to help you. But if you don't ask, people won't know.
People won't know, and they're not being held. These organizations and these school systems, one, they need the help because they need to know how to serve their population, and two, you're giving, like you said, you're giving your power away. You're giving your power away to say, that was a problem, or these transition services could be better. I even tell people, even if nothing. changes because of your complaint or your advocacy. You laid the groundwork by putting that on record. So now the school system can say, "Oh, I never heard of that issue. Oh, I never heard of that." It's just it's so important to, even if it's a little incremental push, to be involved in the process. Tell me about the triumph. So like, how did they get involved with karate? I tried karate. I didn't last, so I give them a lot of credit. How did that all come about for your son?
Well, I figure, they're boys, they need to stay busy, but the first 2 weeks, Donald, they were rough, and I they were not paying attention, they were just running back and forth from the karate school, and I'm
You were
like,
like, "What am I
I
doing?"
know. There was an older gentleman, a wise gentleman, he said, "Listen," he goes, "give it 2 weeks, and they'll be fine," and he was right. After 2 weeks, they were sitting down, they were paying attention, they weren't running back and forth, you know? So, that was
That's
I
actually
could have just
good.
said, "Okay, we're not doing it," right?
Right.
But I said, "No, let's give it some time." And, as you see, or, they continued to stay in karate, and I still think it was one of the best decisions, we've made as far as keeping them busy, and then they're still busy because we go to the Brigantine Aquatic Center, and they both swim. We have it started off at the Special Olympic swim team, and they renamed it Stanley Special Friends after my son Stan. So they still compete Special Olympics, in different area meets, and also they play golf through the Arc of Atlantic County, and they love golf. Stefan actually played in the North America Special Olympic Golf Championship a couple years ago. So they're busy. They probably have more of a social calendar than I do. But it's important. It's really important to just
Well,
kind of
and I
keep
get
them.
that kind of question a lot, Karen, because a lot of people in general, young people with and without disabilities, get really isolated because of a lot of things. Social media, it's easy to get isolated in today's age. So, like, talk about why that's important and why giving your person with the disability also time to adjust, like you talk about. Because I think sometimes you go to these social activities, and like if the person with the disability doesn't act like perfect right away. It's like, I just want to get out of here. But you're right. If you, just like everybody needs time to adjust, like when you have a disability, whatever it is, like it is a lot. It is a lot when you're in a brand new environment and everybody's like, well, here are these new rules. Like it is a lot. So talk about like the importance of socialization, the importance of sometimes doing things, getting out of your comfort zone in a lot of ways, getting out of
Oh,
your comfort.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you're not, if I had said, "Oh, let's just forget karate, this is not gonna work. Oh, let's forget baseball, this is not gonna work." You never know. Your child may surprise you. You may say, "Oh, I don't think they're gonna do this." Give them a chance. If I didn't, stay those 2 weeks in karate and just said, "Oh no, we're just gonna pack up and leave," I would have never seen how far Stefan could have taken it, or how far Stan could take it. But you just have to, believe in your kid, and just try different things,
Right. And
and they have to. It's always good to be social, and and there's so many other, there's like Christmas dances going on. There's a Halloween dance. There's always something to do.
right.
And also for parents, you shouldn't isolate yourself either.
Right.
There's other parents and on these different organizations that are there to ask questions, to be a sound ear for you. So
Have fun,
it's not just about your child, it's also about you as a parent.
right. It's a part of self-care, like
And
your
self-care, yes.
getting your own connections and and I think that's really important because we just shouldn't be afraid to put ourselves and the people with disabilities in uncomfortable. Of course, we want to be safe, but it's sometimes I get a little pushy with people and it's like, well, if Johnny tries that job, it might not work out. I'm like, people without disabilities try jobs all the time and it doesn't work out.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly.
okay to try karate for a while and have it not work out. It's okay. Life is gonna continue. You're gonna learn. You might make friends. You might learn what you're good at. Like it's okay to the struggle is okay. That's how you grow. The struggle is okay. That's how you grow. And I will tell anybody who has somebody with a disability or has a disability themselves, if you're always in your comfort zone and always afraid to fail, that's not a healthy place. It's not a
No,
healthy place.
because
Don't have
it's not good for you, and it's definitely not good for your child either,
no, no.
to feel isolated, you know.
So I always know you as being so busy, and so where did you always want to write books? Did you kind of get talked into it? Like, how did you get into this? How did you get into this mode? Because writing a book is not easy. Writing a book
No,
is
it's not.
there's a lot of people in the world talking about writing books that never get written. So talk about that. Like, how did you get interested in that? Why'd you do that? Was it a long-term dream? How'd you get there?
Well, it actually goes back to Stan. When Stan was the first kid with autism to swim on the Absegami varsity swim team. So it started with that. Stan got a lot of attention, the newspapers, the community, everyone was just so inspired. And people would come up to me all the time, "Oh, you need to share Stan's story." And I'm like, "Oh, I will one day." And so one day I did sit at the
I'm
computer
trying to
and
get through the day. I'm trying to get through the day.
so one day I did sit at the computer and I said, "You know what?" And it just happened to be on Stan's birthday. The house was quiet. Okay, let me just see what I have. I started typing, and before I knew it, I had 10 pages. So after that, each day I would write a little bit more, write a little more, write a little bit more. And then I said, "Oh, we need some testimonials. We need some pictures." And before I knew it, it was a book. I think it took me about 7 months to do.
That's awesome. And then Stefan was right. He's like, "Where's my book? I gotta get a book." Like I can't like that would be me and my siblings too. Like he's not getting a book without my book. Like this is happening. And I think
Well, Stefan's book was a little easier because he knew
know.
the story and he kind of ran with it.
Right. He just needed you to type. He needed you that you needed, and I think what you just said there is so important whenever I have a hard thing to write. And you just have to start writing and like almost don't even worry about like the grammar or the structure. Just like get something down in paper and then you can work on it. So I would just encourage people to get involved in these things. I mean, if you're listening to this and you have a loved one with a disability or have a disability yourself, you don't have to be in New Jersey. There are organizations just begging for volunteers, just looking for board members, looking for people to get involved in the community. And, Google's a beautiful thing. There's so many good things out there. And just get involved and share your experience. Because, like you talk, and we'll wrap up with that, Karyn. Talk about how really your personal experience, you do become the expert in a lot of ways on, I mean, you don't know everything, but just having to navigate the system and make connections, you learn a lot and you pass that knowledge on to other people, maybe new parents, maybe other people with disabilities. Talk about that, how it kind of like you end up helping others just by your journey as well.
Well, people help me, you
Yes.
know? People help me, and I feel like it's my responsibility to help others to pay it forward. So sometimes I'll get calls or I'll get text messages. There's a parent who has a kid who's newly diagnosed. Will you talk to this parent? Sure, absolutely. I don't mind doing that because people did that for me, and I think it's my responsibility to pay it forward. And it's a lot of people, there's a lot of parents here also who, if they're faces for autism, other organizations that they're part of, we all reach out to each other,
Yes.
and I told we all respect each other, and we reach out to each other. We have this going on, that going on. So it's really, really important to be involved in your community, because if you are you know isolating yourself and isolating and having your not having your kid to participate in these things, it's going to be hard when you do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
One day you say, oh, let's just go out. It may be challenging.
Right. Well, I say that too, and we'll wrap up on that. I'll say the earlier you get started doing the things, the easier it is. I know it doesn't mean you can't start if you haven't started earlier and had your challenges, but I know for me in the cell, it's hard when somebody is particularly a parent and they're getting older because that's what happens in life. And now their kids getting older, maybe they're an adult now, and they're like, well, I don't have any services. And the sooner you get that started and start learning about that, that's why I always say, we'll end with this too. Like when they're in school, like Karyn was saying, that when they're in school, that's the time to really double down on advocacy and learning about resources. Because you do get, depending on your school in general, but school should be a safer place with more resources. And once they transition, you want to have things in place. You don't want to wait to the last minute. Not to say that we won't try our best to help you if you did, but and no judgment. But I always say, people are like, how early should I start? I'm like, well,
Yesterday.
yesterday. And when you get a diagnosis, just start reaching out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just start reaching
Yeah.
out to people and going, what did you do? I always say, and one with this tip, my biggest tip, I learned this from my mom. Just like, hi, mom, I love you. I don't know if you listen to every episode, but I always say, collect all the paperwork. You never know when the paperwork, all these resources, no matter what state you're in, are going to demand some degree of paperwork. So when somebody hands you an IEP or anything that says my child has a disability, take that piece of paper and put it in a box and mark it because you don't know it can really come in handy. There's nothing that'll get you resources faster than when you overwhelm a government entity with plenty of plenty of paperwork and documentation. So listen to Karyn. She did it. She navigated. Start yesterday. Just start, again, you're not reinventing the wheel, reaching out, learning what other people did, and don't expect people to knock on your door. I always say that.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time as a person with disability, they say to me, how'd you get a job? I said, well, I had to get involved in the community. And, I went to a board meeting and one thing led to another and I
Yeah.
applied. And if I just stayed in my house, they wouldn't
Yeah.
have said, hey, we got this director thing open up. But
Exactly.
that's not how it works. So get out there to your maximum extent possible and be involved. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Karyn, for doing this.
Can I say one thing,
Yeah,
Donald?
go ahead.
So you mentioned the IEP. Speaking of IEP meetings, you know how many times I'd go to IEP meeting and I hear, "Oh, Mrs. Adams, we've been having supposed to have meetings all day, and you're the only one who showed up." So it's
Right,
not even just high school; it's school, it's middle school, it's
right, and
get
you're
involved.
right,
You
right.
cannot complain if you're not at the meetings.
Right. Don't give up your power. Those IEP meetings are mandated. You can have an IEP meeting once every quarter. You can have as many times as you want. But like Karyn said too, you got to show up too. You got to show up. And just my personal thing too is as your child gets older, start to involve them in the process
Yes,
because they have to know their rights too.
yes.
Because that's what when I have, and now we're just going off and we're going to be here for 2 hours. But what I tell parents is, sometimes they'll come in to see me and they'll do all the talking. I'll ask, what would your child like to do for a job? And the parent will tell me, and I say respectfully, I asked your son or your daughter, because I want to hear from them. I want them to get used to giving their opinion. It doesn't mean you can't, as a parent, contribute and be involved. That's not what I'm saying. But one day you're not going to be there. And
That's right.
they have to learn what their rights are, how to advocate for themselves to the extent they can. To the extent, everybody's got a different type of disability. But I've seen people who I was told, oh, they have no idea what's going on or their disability, they don't know. And then, I get to talking to them a little bit and they knew perfectly well what was happening. They
See?
knew
See?
perfectly well what was happening. So
That's right.
empower yourself and also empower your loved one. Give them a seat at the table too. And really, it's your life at the end of the day. And this awesome book, which we're going to link to, say the title one more time, Karen. We're going to link to it in the description so people can buy it. It's awesome, and Karen's awesome in general, but she's going to give you the title so you can buy it.
It's the challenges and triumphs of Stefan Adams. And I have a website. You can go to the website and you can order the book. and find out any, contact information for me on the website or any upcoming events that I have.
All
And
right,
it's
awesome. And we're gonna link to the website too. Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you everybody for listening.
well, Donald, I really, really like you, so
Yes, yes, I really, really like it too. There's a lot of mutual admiration between us. So
yes.
we're very philosophically aligned. We're very similar in that way. All right, thank you everybody, and see you next time on the Atlantic Cell Podcast. Bye.
Bye.